If you're a game developer who needs to build levels for your games or maybe just prototype things out, stick around because this video is going to be perfect for you. I'm going to run you through a very simple to use snapping system that will allow you to build out levels just by hitting hotkeys or even auto generate them. It's a very simple and powerful system that you could even simply extend with maybe 3 or 4 lines of code to allow your players to build levels at runtime as well. The art I'm going to use will just be a simple space station that I've blocked out in Pro Builder, but my plan is to have a real 3D artist give me assets that match with this. In fact, I've actually hired an artist that I've worked with before to take these art assets or this level that I've built out, replace all of these pieces with something that looks actually pretty and nice and high tech and HD, and then make it available to all of you to download, play with, and experiment with or use in your own games. If you want to make sure not to miss that and get those art assets, then make sure that you've subscribed. And also, hey, while you're there, hit the like button, please. You can also download the assets that I've got here and the code right down below in the description. And again, just hit the like button while you're down there. Before we dive into the code and the prefabs, let's see what it looks like to actually use this system so that things make a bit more sense when we're going through that. I've started here with a nice empty scene, and first I'm just going to add in a space-looking skybox so that things look cool as we're building it up. So I'll grab one of these nebula skyboxes, then we'll go over to the scene view, and I'm going to grab one of my prefabs. So I've got a resources folder with prefabs, and in here I've got an intersection and 2 hull parts. We'll take a look at those in depth in a moment. Again, we're going to start with them, seeing how they work and seeing them in action before we dive into how they work. So we'll take the intersection, we'll drag it out into the scene, and I'm just going to reset the position down to all zeros. Hit F to focus it, and then we'll go take a look at our intersection. Our intersection is split into 8 different parts with 8 different sides that we can add on rooms to. I can select one of these sides just by clicking on it, hold down Alt and hit H and start adding hall parts. Every time I hit H, I get another hall part, and as I hold down Alt and hit I can add more intersections. I can grab any one of these sides, add more hall parts there. Let's add in 4, and then add in another intersection. Actually, let's add in 5. We'll add in another intersection here, and then connect over here with another 5 hall parts, and then another intersection, and another 5 hall parts to make a complete loop. You can see here I can make a giant loop or a giant space station. It doesn't have to loop around like this. I can, of course, just grab any one of these sides and start expanding it out just by holding Alt and hitting H or using my hotkey. And there is one little issue that occurred when I connected these two, that these walls aren't showing as an opening here. You can see there's a window in between them, but I can just select them, and as you see, when I select my hall parts, I have an option to change the opening mode from window maybe down to open so that it's completely open and we can walk through. Now, if you want, you can, of course, swap out these art pieces. They're very simple, and again, I'm going to swap them out myself, and they don't necessarily have to be a space station. This could work for a dungeon, an inside building, think of like a house with a bunch of rooms, or anything else. Space station's just the theme that I wanted to use, and it works really well for this. But first, this video is brought to you by Backtrace. Backtrace is a debugging platform that helps you improve game quality by fully automating error capture. It lets you capture errors in all instances of your game with a single system, and with their web console, it's extremely easy to monitor, analyze, and debug your games across all platforms. Backtrace is hosting their second virtual game developer summit, Breakpoint 2, on February 16th. At this event, you'll get to learn, network, and share best practices with other developers and leaders in the gaming industry. The event is completely free and will feature talk sessions focused on game quality, testing tools and techniques, and performance issues and troubleshooting. The speakers include leaders from Unity, Epic Games, AWS, O3DE, Google Stadia, HelpShift, BitHeads, IGDA, and a whole lot more. I've always thought that going to events like this and networking is extremely important when being in the game dev industry, so sign up today by clicking the link in the description and get a chance to win awesome prizes like a PlayStation 5 or equivalent and a lot more. Before we look at code, let's examine these prefabs and see how they work, because there's another interesting thing going on that's probably of some use to you and is somewhat unrelated to the snapping. Well, it's loosely related. Here's our hall part prefab. You can see that it's got quite a few game objects underneath it, and a good number of them are deactivated. In If I go down and look inside my hall part, you'll see that I've got this big open area with a little gate or grid there. It's supposed to be a shop. And then I've got a room over here that's supposed to be like a crew quarters. It's kind of small. I expect to probably extend it out and make it the full size of the area. And then on each end of it, I've got these little snap points. So you see there's an orange and a blue snap point. Now these are only visual and visible so that I can use them. They don't need to be visible for the code to actually work, but I recommend using them at first and then maybe hiding them away when you're done building your level or when the object's actually live. So we've got the snap points and then we've got these two side rooms, but you probably saw a lot of other side rooms. You saw windows and things with shops on both sides as I was going through the different areas. And that's all done on this hall part script. So if you take a look at the actual hall part at the parent, I've got 2 copies of this hall part script, and each one of them updates or modifies a single side of the hall. If I select my first one that is set to small open and change that to window, you'll see that I get a window on this side. So my right hand side is now a window instead of a shop or instead of a room. I can change it to open, which actually just turns it into a shop right now, or even into closed, which just makes a wall. Or I could go back to small open. I can do the same with the hall part over here on the side, and that's how I get these giant areas with like a huge set of windows along one side or maybe a huge set of shops along another side. I can just select all of the hall parts I want and then click and select the mode that I want them to be in. Or I can randomize them with a very simple script that just chooses a random mode. The intersection isn't too much different. It has a centerpiece here, which is just a transform, and then the 8 sides around it. Each of the 8 sides underneath it has a snapping point so that I can snap the other objects to it. And if we take a look at these snap points, you can see the little orange block sitting right outside of there that's meant to line up exactly with the hall parts. And then we've got underneath there a hall part script. So if you look at the side here, it's actually reusing that hall part script and allowing us to change modes between closed, windowed, open, and small open's actually not supported on this one. So I might support it later or have it be like a room or something else off to the side. In fact, I'll probably add quite a few different opening modes as we go along. But to connect rooms up, we need them to be in the open mode. So that's basically the extent of our prefabs. Let's take a look at the code and see how it all works, how we're able to select one of these hall parts and then hit Alt H and have a hall part snap onto it, or another hall piece. I guess that's kind of an interesting confusion of names. I've named my hall parts on the end of the intersection the same thing as my prefabs. So let's take a look at it. First, let's go examine these 2 objects here. You can see that they're connected right here at these snap points. I've got a blue snap point that I just made blue and made a square that was kind of hollow. It's just an empty little circle. You can see, I can pull it up, made in Pro Builder. Nothing special at all. My orange snap point, exactly the same, but the one thing that they both have in common is that they both have this snap point script on them. And then they have a snap target as well that's telling us which object they're snapped to. So this intersection snap point is snapped to the blue one under the hall part. And if I look at the blue one under the hall part, you see that that one is snapped to the intersection. So they both know that they are linked to each other. Now we're going to dive into the snap point code. The first thing to note is that we use the selection base attribute, and that's just so that when we're selecting in the scene view or clicking in the scene view, the objects with a snap point script on them will be prioritized for selection. So we can easily click on them, select them, and then add more hall points or other points to them. I also have the execute and edit mode attribute on here, but realized that I could probably just delete that. Don't need it anymore. It's for when I was moving things around, but now I do that at the snappable room level, which you'll see is on line number 9. We'll talk about snappable rooms in a moment. First, let's jump back to line 8 where we have that snap target that we were looking at. That's publicly accessible, and it gets set by a couple different things. You'll see that there are a few references to it. We'll take a look at that after we look at the snap and align methods. So the snap to method is one of the core pieces of the work that we're doing here. It's going to move our object, this object, to snap over to another object. Now we do this in 2 steps. We actually do an align and a snap, but let's take a look at the snap first and see why we need the alignment. The first thing that I do is just record an undo so that if I don't like what happens here, I can hit Control Z and snap my snappable rooms transform settings back to what they were before. So this is going to record the current settings of my transform for this snappable room, and then it's going to allow me to undo them just by hitting Control Z. Then I get the offset. I need the offset from the center of my room, so this is the parent of that snap point, to the actual snap point itself. This is going to be however many meters away my snap point is from the pivot or the center of the room. It's really the pivot of the room, not so much the center, but usually the center is somewhat the pivot, or the bottom center is the pivot. Now, in my case, you'll see that the offset is going to vary dramatically. If we look at a hall part, you'll see that the blue snap point is offset by 10 on the X and 1 on the Z, 0.5 on the Y. And then the orange one is at 10.5 and negative 13.5. It's also rotated 180 degrees out. This is an important thing for the alignment. The forward direction of our snap points should point out, and then they're going to snap together, pointing at each other. Let's jump back into the code and see how that's working. So we've got the offset. Then we just need to figure out the new position of our room. So the room that's the parent, or the actual hall part. We do that by combining the offset plus the other position, and then just in line 16 assigning it. I've kind of split it into a few lines here just to make it a little bit easier to understand the steps. Now, snapping alone isn't enough to make this work. In fact, you'll find out in a second that snapping is actually step 2. Let's see what happens if we just try to snap 2 points together without doing some alignment first. Here I've taken my hall part, just moved it away a little bit so that it's not connected directly in the correct spot, and then rotated it so that it's kind of randomly off. Imagine I've just grabbed a hall part and dropped it out into the scene. I want to connect it up somewhere, and I just try to snap them together. That's what we're going to see now. So I'll select my snap point, and I've added a context menu item here so that we can right click and choose snap to my target, which we'll call snap to, and pass in our snap target. So let's try right clicking and seeing what that does. I right click and choose snap to my target, and look at my hall part. It's there, it's in the right position, but it's definitely not lined up right. So we need to do a little bit of alignment as well. Let's take a look at the code for alignment now. Now, I want to be clear when we look at the align code that there's probably a more optimal way to deal with this and to line things up exactly right. And if you happen to know that, please drop a comment down below. I'd love to get a discussion going and make this a little bit better. But I'm terrible with quaternions and 3D math, so I got this working and it seems to be enough. Let's take a look at what it actually does. The first thing that we do is calculate out the rotation offset from the snap point to its snappable room. So we figure out what that room is and figure out the rotation offset. Now on my hall parts, it's relatively simple. It's either 0 or 180. But for the snappable rooms, they vary by 60 or 45 degrees per snap point. So you'll see that there's a big variety there. And I need to have that rotation offset so that I can use it at the end here on line 38. But let's see what we do next. We next record the snappable rooms transform so that we can undo the rotation if we want. Very handy to have. And then we rotate the object first to match the other object's rotation. So we take the other snap point and we rotate our room to match that snap point's rotation. Then we flip it around completely because that rotation is backwards, and then modify it again by the rotation offset from the parent. This gets it aligned up perfectly so that if we call align followed by snap, which you can see in my align and snap to me method right below, the object will align into the correct orientation and then snap right into the correct position. Let's right click and try the align and snap to me option. So I'm going to go select the other snap point because it said to me, which means it's going to snap the other one to me. I'll right click and choose align and snap to me. Oh, my snap target's not set, so I'll just make sure that I've dragged out my snap target and assigned it. Then we'll right click again and choose align and snap to me. So how is the automatic building working? You can see the snapping now. You can see how levels can kind of come together and I can put parts out there. But what's happening with this Alt-H hotkey and the Alt-I? How is all the magic kind of occurring to allow me to just select this room, hit Alt-H, 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 and keep putting in more rooms? That's actually done through my tools menu. If you look at the tools menu up here, see I have quite a few different hotkeys set up. I've got one to add an intersection, one to add a hall part, and one to add an orange hall part. Let's add the orange hall part. Let's go take a look at how that's set up and how we're creating the new rooms and then auto snapping them together. The hotkeys and commands you saw are all provided by my Snap Tools static class. That's just using the menu item attribute of Unity to give me menu items that pop up with a hotkey built in. The ampersand and a letter just makes it Alt and that letter to be my hotkey. I could also just choose something like F11 or F5 or whatever hotkey I like, but I felt that Alt I and Alt H made a lot of sense for intersections and hallways. You could, of course, modify this code and make it so that you can put whatever types of prefabs you want, or even have a list of prefabs and then have it be alt and some number or whatever setup you want. But I wanted to keep mine simple, and I want to run you through how this simple setup works now. So I've got attach intersection assigned as Alt I. So when I hit Alt I get a new intersection, and that calls attach room and passes in the word or name intersection. Let's take a look at the attach room method down below. This is just another static method that takes the name of the room I'd like to attach. It first tries to find a snap point to attach to. So it looks through the object that we have selected and then tries to find a snap point. Let's take a look at that code because I think it's somewhat important. We'll extend out the try get snap point for attach, and you'll see that it actually does quite a bit. Now initially, all I used to do was grab the active game object from our selection and look for a snap point. If there was a snap point there, I returned it and allowed us to work with it. Otherwise, I said, nope, we'll bail out. We don't have a snap point selected. It was a lot harder that way. I had to actually go in, select the exact snap point that I wanted, and really it was too much work. So I extended it out a little bit. Made it so that I could also just select a room. So if I have a snappable room selected, we'll instead just find the next open point on that snappable room. So next open point just looks through all of the points, calling first or default, looking for one that has a null snap target. And then it used to do some mode setting, but we don't do that anymore. We've cleaned things up a little bit. Let's go back and see what the other thing is. So if we don't get a room and we don't get a snap point, we might also have a hall part selected, which is actually what I do a lot when I'm adding points onto an intersection. If I do have a hall part selected, then I try to find the snap point parent and then use that. And all of these methods, or all of these calls in here, I guess checks, really just assign the selected point, which is an out variable, and then it returns true if we've found one. Otherwise, it returns false, just like any other try get type method you would expect to see, like try get component. Let's see what it does next. If we don't find a point, then we just return. But assume that we do find a point, either from our hall part, our room, or from actually selecting one. Then we call the snappableRoom.spawnRoom method, which just returns back a snappable room. Let's take a peek at that because it is also pretty important. Snappable room spawn room is actually really simple. It loads my resource space station settings, which it really shouldn't do every single time, but I'm lazy and didn't want to cache this. So it loads the resource space station settings, named settings, and then it grabs the rooms out of my list of snappable rooms and finds the one that matches the name. Then we instantiate the prefab, get the snappable room object, and return it. Let's go see what that settings object looks like. Here you see settings just has hall part 2, and intersection. So again, I could probably change this up and make it so that these are hotkeyed 1, 2, and 3, or something else, or make a dynamic list that allows us to more, I guess, expressively decide what parts we want to have and not hard code it quite as much. Very easy change to make though if you want to make that. Then we'll continue on and take a look at the next bit of code where we just assign the snap targets. We assign our selected point's snap target to the one that we have found, and then we assign the point that we found, snap target, over to our selected point. Remember, the selected one is the one that we have selected in the editor. Then we call snap and align, which does our align to and snap to method calls. And then finally, we get the other point, or the next open point, and we select that so that it's easy to just continue on. We call active game object, or assign the active game object to the new selected open point. So I can easily just keep hitting that button and keep adding on more points. Now, if this was helpful for you, please, again, hit the thumbs up button, check out the sponsor Backtrace, and download the code down below. You can use it in your own projects, experiment with it, or drop a comment and let me know how to improve it. I'm sure there are plenty of opportunities to make it better, and your feedback would definitely help. So Thanks again for watching. Thanks for joining me for this. And if you like this kind of thing, this is the kind of tutorial you want to see more of, please let me know with thumbs up and a comment, and I'll keep making more of these. Also, don't forget to check out Backtrace and sign up for their completely free virtual game developer summit, Breakpoint 2. Get a chance to network, share, and learn best practices with other developers by simply clicking the link in the description.